Well, we're going to see exactly what caused this problem. As you mentioned earlier, Liz, some of the companies pulled production because of some problems they had that the FDA had alerted them to. But then the FDA, knowing this, didn't do anything to try to come up with a backup plan on how to ensure that there's going to be enough baby formula on the market. The 43% of the baby formula is in shortage right now, and 75% of babies use the baby formula. So this is a crisis. And you mentioned all the crises in the Biden administration. Today, this is at the top of the list. And if you think about the FDA under Joe Biden, he went over a year without even naming a commissioner. So here's a government agency that's been run by bureaucrats, that's had no accountability, no oversight, and a lot of the employees have been working from home ever since COVID started. So the FDA is behind schedule, and this is another example of how the FDA is putting Americans' lives at risk.
Yeah, to the congressman's point, Brandon, you know, White House officials Jen Psaki and Brian Deese, they keep saying, we've been working on this since the start of the year. Then they say to people, you know, call your doctor if you have an issue. And let's listen to the president. He's saying he's addressing the baby formula shortage because all of a sudden it's in the news. Watch this.
Are you satisfied with your administration's response so far?
If we'd been better mind readers, I guess we could have, but we moved as quickly as the problem became apparent to us. 3 questions. I'll answer the baby formula question because all of a sudden it's on the front page of every newspaper, and it's important that I be responded to.
Okay, you see what's going on. He's downplaying and dismissing it, right? And then he's making like, you know, we're on the stick. We've got a new Monmouth poll, Brandon. Nearly 8 out of 10 say America's heading in the wrong direction. That seems like a record high.
Right. I mean, it's a problem that's persisted for months now. Inflation has lasted for well over a year. This baby formula shortage has existed for months. And just because it happens to be on the front page of the newspaper, that's why this administration is suddenly paying attention to it. Had it not popped up on shows like yours, on the newspapers across the country, who knows what this administration would do, and who knows what kind of situation mothers and fathers would be in right now as they try to feed their children. You know, there's all sorts of government red tape in the way, and they're just now starting to cut it. The House Democrats just announced they're going to tackle a bill next week. They should have been doing all these things months ago. They should have been cutting red tape from the get-go to alleviate some of these problems before they got to this crisis point that we're facing right now.
Okay, there's that and there's this. You know, Congressman and Brandon, when people go into the polls to pull the lever to vote, they're going to think of this. They may, a lot of them may. Watch this.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Well, are we, Congressman? Because Pew Research now says Americans see inflation as the #1 problem.
Well, inflation is the #1 problem. I think every American sees this. Anyone that has a 401k recognizes the damage that the Biden policies have done. Anyone that owns a home or a vehicle or has a job and pays taxes, has a child in the public school system, anyone that watches the news, that cares about crime and border security realizes that every major decision that Joe Biden's made has had a detrimental impact on their lives. And I think Americans are going to turn out in the droves this November to vote Republican.
You know, to the congressman's point, Brandon, right? I mean, the headline inflation number is 8.3%, but Americans feel it much deeper. They see double-digit spikes higher in gas and groceries and tuition and housing costs. I mean, inflation is cutting wage gains by, I think, 2.6%. Americans are really feeling it.
Yeah, that's what's unique about this economic situation. It really hits Americans in such a direct fashion. This isn't some kind of theoretical problem that we're facing. This is something that Americans deal with every time they go to the grocery store, every time they fill up their car with gasoline. And of course, the product shortages are even more critical when you're talking about things like baby formula. And, you know, the president has been blaming everybody. He's been blaming Putin. He's been blaming the pandemic. He's been blaming everybody but himself, when the fact is, his policies, especially the American Rescue Plan Act that was passed early last year, have contributed to this crisis. It's the reason why our inflation rate is so much higher than that of wealthy countries in Europe. We are an outlier here, and we're an outlier because of this president's policies.
And you know what Americans are paying for? They're paying for the ideologues in government. That's what they're paying for. They're paying for in higher inflation, higher taxes, for people to shut down and debank and defund U.S. oil and gas, stop drilling in the Gulf. They're pushing to Biden to plow even more hot money into the system that's been locked up. Let's listen to the Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo, talk about climate change. Watch what she says here. Listen.
We believe climate change is an existential threat. So, children won't forget about clothes on their back. They're not going to be able to have a life if we don't deal with climate change.
Forget about the clothes on their backs, on children's backs, Congressman? Climate change is more important than your children's clothes? I know she didn't mean it to say it that way, but that's where we're at. What do you say?
Well, you're exactly right. The Biden administration is as out of touch as any administration in my lifetime. You cannot have an administration comprised of a bunch of bureaucrats and college professors and expect anything different than what we have. You have a bunch of socialists and extreme liberals making major policy decisions, and now we've had time for those policy decisions to come into play. And I think every American hopefully is seeing that this is detrimental to their wallet, to their savings, to their lives, and their children's education. The list goes on and on.